At the wedding, the guests laughed at the gift from the 85-year-old neighbor, an old, darkened teapot. "Take care of it," she said mysteriously. 10 years later, it was this very teapot that saved the family. That May Day was exceptionally warm and sunny, as if nature itself had decided to bless the union of Camilla and John. In a small countryside cafe on the riverbank, friends and relatives of the newlyweds had gathered. White tablecloths fluttered in the light breeze, and bouquets of lilacs and tulips, which Camilla had picked herself from her parents' garden the day before the wedding, adorned the tables. The bride, in a simple yet elegant cream-colored dress, looked happy and slightly nervous. John kept adjusting his tie, smiling at the guests, and wrapping his arm around his newlywed wife's waist. They had met at university 3 years earlier and hadn't spent a day apart since. Both worked at a small video company, he as a programmer, she as a designer. They dreamed of owning an apartment and having children. "Well now, newlyweds, it's time to receive your congratulations," Camilla's uncle, the host, announced loudly, and the guests began gathering around the gift table. Their parents gave them a bedroom furniture set, their friends, kitchenware and household appliances, and their co-workers, a gift certificate to a furniture store. Everything was practical, useful, and brought joy to the couple. Camilla was carefully noting each present in a special notebook so she could write thank you cards later when she suddenly noticed a short elderly woman in a dark blue dress with a small handbag slowly approaching their table. It was Leslie Abrams, their neighbor from the 4th floor, who lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment across the hall. "Oh, Leslie!" Camilla exclaimed in surprise. "We're so glad you came. We dropped the invitation in your mailbox, but we weren't sure." "Of course I came, dear," the old woman smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes becoming more pronounced. "How could I miss such a celebration? You two are such a lovely couple, always say hello, help with heavy bags. And John, why, he just fixed the lock on my door not long ago." John blushed in embarrassment. "Oh, it was nothing, Leslie. Thank you for coming. It means a lot." The elderly woman carefully placed a small bundle on the table, wrapped in old newspaper and tied with simple string. From its size and shape, it was clear that something round and not very large was inside. "This is for you, my dears, from the heart," she said, slightly nervous. "A modest gift, but heartfelt. Just take care of it, all right? It will bring you happiness in difficult times. Believe an old woman." Camilla and John exchanged curious glances and began unwrapping the bundle. From beneath the newspaper emerged a time-darkened copper teapot with a curved spout and a wooden handle. It was clearly very old, with spots of greenish patina, looking like it had stood on someone's kitchen shelf for decades. "Oh," Camilla murmured, trying to hide her disappointment. "Thank you so much, Leslie. A very unique gift. Truly a vintage piece," John added, turning the teapot over in his hands. "Does it still work?" "Of course it works," the neighbor nodded. "My grandmother used to brew tea in it, then my mother. It's been in our family for many years. Just don't throw it away, all right? And don't stick it in the shed. Treat it like the apple of your eye." From a nearby table came restrained chuckles. Camilla noticed her childhood friend Lena whispering something into her husband's ear, and he was covering his mouth, trying not to laugh. John's cousin didn't even bother hiding it. "Some gift," he said loudly. "People usually give something new for weddings, not a museum piece. Camilla, you should use it as a flower vase. There's no other use for it." "Quiet," John's father hissed. "Not in front of the old lady." But Leslie heard everything. Her face darkened slightly, though she kept smiling. "It's all right, let them laugh. They're still young. They don't understand that not everything in life is measured by how new or expensive it is. Some gifts are more precious than gold. You just don't realize it right away. Camilla felt embarrassed by the guest's behavior and squeezed the neighbor's hand tighter. Leslie, we're very grateful. Truly. And we will take good care of your teapot. Would you like to stay for dinner? There'll be cake, music. No, dear, thank you. I'm too old for these festivities. I'll head home, you celebrate. Just remember what I said, take care of the teapot. It will serve you faithfully when the time comes. The old woman slowly rose from the table, kissed the newlyweds on the cheeks, and, limping slightly, made her way toward the exit. Camilla watched her go, feeling a strange sense of sadness. What was that all about? John muttered, examining the teapot again. When the time comes. Sounds like something out of a fairy tale. Maybe she's just superstitious? At her age, people often believe in omens, Camilla shrugged. All right, let's just put it away for now. We'll decide what to do with it later. They carefully wrapped the teapot back in newspaper and placed it with the rest of the gifts. The celebration continued late into the evening. Guests danced, sang songs, and wished the couple happiness. But from time to time, Camilla caught herself thinking about the neighbor's strange words and the mysterious look that had flashed in her eyes as she handed them the old teapot. Late that night, after the last guests had left and the newlyweds returned to their rented one-room apartment, John set the box of gifts down in the hallway. We'll sort through all this treasure tomorrow, he said tiredly, taking off his jacket. Right now I just want to sleep. What about the teapot? Camilla asked, changing into her nightgown. Put it in the overhead storage for now. There's room up there. Maybe we'll find a use for it someday, John yawned. Though honestly, I can't imagine what for. And so, Leslie's old copper teapot ended up on the top shelf in the hallway, among boxes of winter clothes and old textbooks. The newlyweds quickly forgot about it, caught up in their new life, future plans, and everyday concerns. But the teapot patiently waited for its moment, guarding a secret no one yet suspected. The first months of married life flew by like one happy day. Camilla and John rented a small two-room apartment on the outskirts of the city, where for a reasonable price they got bright rooms overlooking a playground and a small park. Every weekend they visited furniture stores, picking out a sofa, dining table, wardrobes, all the things that turn empty walls into a true home. John turned out to be a surprisingly handy husband. In the evenings, he built shelves, fixed the kitchen faucet, or tinkered with the wiring, while Camilla cooked dinner and told him about her workday. Their small IT company was thriving, orders kept coming in, and skilled young specialists were in high demand. You know, John said one evening, putting down a screwdriver and wiping his hands with a cloth, I think it's time we started thinking about buying our own place. Renting is just throwing money away. Camilla, standing at the stove stirring pasta, turned and smiled. Do we have enough for a down payment? Apartments are so expensive now. We will if we save for another 6 or 7 months. The rest we'll take out as a loan. Our salaries are stable, we'll manage. A year after the wedding, they celebrated 2 big events at once, the purchase of their own 3-room apartment in a new neighborhood, and the news that Camilla was pregnant. The apartment was spacious and bright, with a large kitchen and a balcony overlooking a park. The mortgage was sizable, but John had just been promoted and was now heading the development department, with his salary increasing by almost 50%. We've got this, he said, hugging his wife and gently patting her still flat belly. In 15 years we'll pay off the bank, and the apartment will be completely ours, John would say, smiling. When they moved into the new apartment, Leslie's old teapot automatically ended up in the overhead storage in the hallway once again, never even unwrapped. Camilla glanced briefly at the familiar newspaper bundle as John placed it on the top shelf. "Remember that gift?" he chuckled. "Hard to believe we're still dragging it around." "She asked us to take care of it," Camilla replied while folding winter clothes into the closet. "It feels wrong to throw it out. It doesn't take up much space." Their son Oliver was born, a strong, healthy baby with his father's dark eyes and his mother's smile. Camilla went on maternity leave and dedicated herself fully to motherhood. John worked harder than ever, knowing he was now the family's sole provider. In the evenings, he came home exhausted but happy, took Oliver into his arms, and told him about his day at work, though the baby was much more interested in colorful toys. "Look, buddy," John would say, showing Oliver a new mobile phone. "Dad got a bonus for a project. Soon we'll build you the most beautiful kids' room." And things truly were going well for the family. They furnished the nursery with modern furniture, bought a stroller that transformed into a car seat, and got everything they needed for the baby. When Oliver turned 2, Camilla returned to work, enrolling him in a private daycare near their home. She was promoted as well, now a lead designer. She managed a small team. When Oliver turned 3, a daughter was born, Kimmy. She was the complete opposite of her brother, quiet and calm. She loved looking at picture books and could spend hours playing with dolls. The apartment was filled with the sound of children's laughter, toys scattered everywhere, and that special atmosphere you only find in homes where little kids are growing up. "We need a car," John said one day, rocking Kimmy in his arms while Camilla got Oliver ready for daycare. "It's getting hard to manage with 2 kids on public transport, especially in winter. Can we afford another loan?" Camilla asked cautiously. "We already have a mortgage. We'll manage. Salaries are growing, the company is expanding. And besides, a car isn't a luxury, it's a necessity." They bought a used but reliable car, taking out another loan. Now every morning John drove the kids to kindergarten and picked them up in the evening. On weekends, the family would drive out of town to visit their parents or just enjoy nature. Life seemed settled and stable. Oliver started school, and it turned out the boy was very talented. He learned easily and took a keen interest in math and programming, just like his dad. Kimmy grew older and showed talent in drawing, something her mother was very proud of. The family lived a full life: school celebrations, birthdays, summer vacations at the seaside, New Year's trees. "You know," Camilla said one day while looking through family photos, "we're so happy. The kids are healthy, we love our jobs, and our home is full and warm. It's hard to believe there was a time we were worried whether we'd manage the loans." John hugged his wife and kissed her on the temple. "Remember how scared we were about handling the mortgage? And now, we've already paid off nearly half. Another 7 or 8 years, and the apartment will be fully ours." In 10 years of marriage, they never once thought about the old kettle gathering dust on the top shelf. During renovations, they moved it from place to place, but no one ever bothered to peek under the newspaper wrapping. The kettle had become part of the decor, a familiar, unnoticed object no one gave much thought to. However, life has a way of changing suddenly, just when everything seems to be moving along a clear and steady path. The IT sector began to shift dramatically. Many Western companies withdrew from the domestic market. There were fewer projects, and competition intensified. At first, only bonuses were affected, they became smaller. Then salaries were frozen. "It's nothing serious," John would say as he browsed news and job listings. "Just temporary difficulties. The market will stabilize, and things will get back on track." But Camilla increasingly heard a note of worry in his voice, and the old kettle on the shelf continued patiently waiting for the moment once mentioned by the wise neighbor. Trouble arrived on a cold February morning as John was getting ready for work. The phone rang at 6:30, and a sleepy Camilla heard her husband speaking quietly in the hallway. His voice was tense, and his sentences were short. "Got it. Yes, I'll come. When exactly?" "What happened?" she asked when John returned to the bedroom and began dressing in a hurry. "Mr. Rogers called, the director. Emergency meeting at 8 a.m. He said it's important news." By the way her husband avoided meeting her gaze, Camilla knew the news would not be good. John had worked at the company for 8 years, knew all the processes like the back of his hand, and management valued him. But in recent months, the atmosphere in the office had grown tense. Clients were pulling out of projects, payments were delayed, and rumors of layoffs were growing louder. That evening, John came home looking grim and defeated. The kids were already asleep, and Camilla was setting the table in the kitchen when she heard the front door close. Normally, her husband would come straight to the kitchen, talk about his day, and ask about the family. But today, he walked into the living room and sank heavily into an armchair. "John, are you going to eat?" Camilla called. "Not hungry," he replied flatly. She dried her hands on a towel and went into the living room. John sat with his head in his hands, staring at one spot. "Did they let you go?" Camilla asked quietly, though the answer was clear from his posture. "The entire department. The company is shutting down the development division. They say it's no longer profitable. Only tech support and sales are staying." Camilla sat down on the armrest of his chair and placed a hand on his shoulder. It was tense, like stone. "They're giving severance. 2 months' salary. That should last us 2 months if we tighten our belts." After that, he looked up at his wife with tired eyes. "After that, I don't know. There are few job openings in my field, competition is fierce, and the salaries they offer are half of what I used to earn." The next few weeks became a nightmare of constant job searching. Every day, John sent out resumes, went to interviews, and met with former colleagues hoping to find some leads. But the response was always the same. "We're not hiring at the moment. We'll consider your application. We'll call you back." Camilla started looking for extra work as well, but her income as a designer was clearly not enough to cover all the family's expenses. The mortgage alone was $1,000 a month, the car loan another $450, plus utilities, food, clothes for growing children, school supplies for Oliver, and extracurricular classes for Kimmy. "Mom, why is Dad so sad?" 8-year-old Oliver asked one day as they walked home from school. "Dad is looking for a new job, sweetheart." "These are just temporary difficulties," Camilla replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "Are we going to live in another house?" "Of course not. This is our home, we're not going anywhere." But inside, fear was tightening its grip on her. Their savings were shrinking day by day. First, they used up the severance pay. Then they started borrowing from their parents. After that, they took out a consumer loan to cover the most urgent expenses. The first call from the bank came in March. "Hello. This is the debt collection department of the bank. You're speaking with Charlotte Morris. You've fallen behind on your mortgage payments." "I know," John interrupted. "We're temporarily unable to pay the full amount, but the situation will improve soon. I understand your difficulties, but the bank can't wait indefinitely. I recommend visiting a branch to restructure the debt. Otherwise, we'll have to begin foreclosure proceedings." Debt restructuring meant the payments would decrease slightly, but the total amount owed would increase, and the loan would take longer to repay. But there was no other choice. It gave the family time to find a way out of the crisis. John found work as a courier for a food delivery service. The salary was a third of what he used to earn, but at least it was something. Every day he drove around the city in his car, delivering orders to offices and apartments. And every evening, he returned home exhausted and dejected. "I feel like a failure," he admitted to Camilla one late night. "A university degree, years of experience, and I'm delivering pizza just to feed my family." "You're doing everything you can," she hugged him. "This is temporary. Something in your field will come along." But time went on, and no decent job offers appeared. Meanwhile, the calls from the banks became more frequent. Now they called every day, reminding them of overdue payments and threatening serious consequences. In May, an official letter arrived from the bank. Camilla opened the envelope with trembling hands and read the words that froze her blood. "We hereby notify you of the initiation of foreclosure proceedings on the mortgaged property due to breach of obligations under the loan agreement." "They want to take the apartment," she told her husband, handing him the letter. John read the document several times, as if unable to believe his eyes. "They're giving us one more month. If we don't repay the entire debt, they'll start auctioning it off." "How much do we owe?" $20,000. Principal, plus penalties and interest. 20,000, a sum that seemed unreachable. Even if they sold the car, it would only cover a third of the debt. And without the car, John wouldn't be able to work as a courier and would lose his only income. The children sensed the tension in the house. Oliver's school performance began to suffer. He often asked about why they no longer visited their grandparents or went to cafes on weekends. Kimmy, though younger, also became more irritable and restless. "Mom, are we poor?" she asked one day when Camilla explained why they couldn't buy a new doll. "No, sweetheart, we're just going through a tough time right now. Things will get better soon." But Camilla no longer believed those words herself. At night, she lay awake, endlessly going over possible ways to save their home. She could ask her parents for help, but their pensions were small, and they couldn't raise that kind of money. Friends weren't an option either. Everyone was struggling in these hard times. A July morning brought yet another blow. The final warning from the bank arrived. The letter was short and merciless. "If the debt is not paid within 7 days, the property will be listed for auction. You are required to vacate the premises within 1 month of the sale." Camilla sat in the kitchen with the letter in her hands, crying. For the first time since the beginning of the crisis, she allowed herself to break down in despair and helplessness. The kids were at school and daycare. John had gone to work, and she could let go. "What are we going to do?" she whispered through tears. "Where can we get 20,000 in a week?" That same evening, after the bank's final warning had arrived, Camilla sat in the kitchen making a list of everything they could sell. A sheet of paper lay in front of her, her hand trembling as she held the pen. A cup of cold tea sat forgotten on the table. She had completely lost track of it, immersed in desperate calculations. "TV, 200, if we're lucky," she muttered, writing down numbers. "Washing machine, 500. Fridge? No, we can't live without it, the kids." When John came home from work, he found his wife engaged in this grim task. His face was gray with exhaustion. There were sauce stains on his shirt from an order a customer had spilled. "What are you doing?" he asked, sitting down opposite her. "Calculating how much we could get if we sold all the equipment and furniture. So far, it's about 4,000. It's just a drop in the ocean." John took the list, scanned through the lines, and sighed heavily. What about the jewelry? Your earrings that your mother gave you for your wedding? My watch? I've already listed them, Camilla nodded. Another couple thousand, no more. Still not enough, Camilla said. They sat silently for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Voices of children could be heard through the wall. Oliver was helping Kimmy with a drawing, explaining how to color the flowers properly. Their carefree voices seemed so far removed from adult problems. Maybe we should try to get a loan from another bank, John suggested, using the remaining share in the apartment as collateral. I've already called 3 banks, Camilla sighed. They say, given our credit history and my salary, we won't get much. And that will only postpone the inevitable. Then maybe we should agree to sell. At least something will remain after paying off the debt. We can rent a smaller apartment. A lump rose in Camilla's throat. This apartment was their dream, their nest, the place where their children grew up and where they were truly happy. I can't imagine how I'll explain to the kids that we have no home, she whispered. The next day, Camilla took a day off work and went to pawnshops and consignment stores to find out the real prices for their things. Reality turned out to be even worse than she expected. The equipment they had bought on credit several years ago had depreciated many times over. Jewelry was appraised only by the weight of the gold, without considering its beauty or the craftsmanship. These earrings are pretty, said an elderly woman at the pawnshop, examining John's mother's wedding gift through a magnifying glass. But the gold is low quality, and the stones are artificial. I can offer you 8,000. But they were worth 30. Worth it then, but times have changed. And besides, that's retail price. We're buying for resale. By the end of the day, it became clear that even if they sold absolutely everything, including their wedding rings, they wouldn't raise much. It was catastrophically insufficient. In the evening, Camilla wandered around the apartment as if saying goodbye to every corner. She stopped by the children's drawings on the fridge, touched the soft upholstery of the sofa where she and John spent evenings, peeked into the children's rooms where toys and books lined the shelves. Maybe I'm missing something? She thought. Maybe there's something valuable we forgot about. She went to the bedroom, opened the wardrobe, and started sorting through things on the top shelves, old photo albums, boxes with documents, Christmas decorations. Nothing valuable. Then she went to the hallway, took a few boxes down from the loft storage and a stool. The first box contained winter hats and scarves, the second, John's old programming textbooks that were long outdated. In the third box, Camilla saw a familiar newspaper bundle tied with twine. Leslie's kettle, she whispered. I completely forgot about it. It's been lying here for 10 years. Carefully unwrapping it, she saw a darkened copper kettle covered with patches of greenish tarnish. It looked quite shabby, like ordinary old kitchenware you might find in a summer house or a country home. Although, Camilla thought, what if it really is antique? Antiques are valued, after all. Maybe it's worth showing to an expert? She remembered her neighbor's words, it will bring you luck in difficult times. Back then, it seemed like an old woman's superstition. But now, if this isn't a difficult time, then what is? Camilla smiled bitterly. The next morning, she went to an antique shop in the city center. A small shop on the ground floor of an old building was filled with all kinds of items, paintings in heavy frames, porcelain figurines, old clocks, silver cup holders. Behind the counter sat a man of about 50, wearing glasses and a knitted vest. He was examining something through a magnifying glass and making notes in a notebook. Hello, Camilla began uncertainly. May I ask for your advice? Of course, The man put down the magnifying glass. My name is Leon. What do you have? Camilla placed the kettle on the counter. Under the lamplight, it looked even more worn and unimpressive. This kettle. I'd like to know if it has any value. An elderly neighbor gave it to me, saying it's antique. Leon took the kettle, turned it in his hands, carefully examined the spout, handle, and lid. Copper, handmade, he muttered. Interesting shape. Does it have a maker's mark? A maker's mark? Yes. Usually craftsmen left their marks on their work. Let's see. He turned on a bright lamp and began carefully examining the bottom of the kettle. Camilla stood nearby, clutching her hands and barely breathing. So much depended on this inspection. All right, the antiques dealer drew out, bringing the magnifying glass closer to the bottom. There's something here. Very worn, but... He was silent for several minutes, sometimes bringing the magnifier closer, sometimes moving it away. You know what? He finally said, raising his head. I'll need some time for a more detailed study. If you don't mind, leave the kettle for a day. I want to compare some details with catalogs. Can you give me an estimate? It's too early for that. But I'll say one thing, this is definitely unusual kitchenware. The workmanship is fine, professional. If my assumptions are confirmed, this piece could be quite valuable. Camilla's heart started pounding faster. The word valuable sounded like music after all these weeks of despair. Come by tomorrow around noon, Leon added. I'll try to give you a more accurate appraisal. That day felt like the longest in Camilla's life. She couldn't focus on work, constantly checking the clock, imagining every possible scenario. Sometimes she hoped the kettle would turn out to be a true treasure, sometimes she braced for disappointment. She hadn't told John anything yet, she didn't want to give him false hope. Only after the children went to bed did she confess. John, I took the old lady's kettle to the antiques dealer. Remember, she gave it to us for the wedding? Seriously, her husband was surprised. What did he say? I'll find out tomorrow. But the dealer said it might be valuable. Don't hope too much, John said cautiously, so he wouldn't get upset later. But deep down, he too felt a faint flicker of hope. What if the old neighbor really knew something they didn't? The next day Camilla arrived at the antique shop exactly at noon as agreed. Her heart was pounding so hard she feared she might feel sick right there in the store. Leon greeted her with a mysterious smile and gestured for her to follow him into the back room behind the counter. Please, sit down, he said, pointing to a chair at a small table. What I'm about to tell you might surprise you. On the table was the kettle, but it looked completely different now. Leon had partially cleaned it from the tarnish, and the copper gleamed with a warm golden hue. Delicate engraved patterns appeared on the surface, elegant curls and ornaments that had been hidden under the layer of time. Your kettle turned out to be a real find, the antiques dealer began, gently stroking the surface of the piece. This is the work of a famous craftsman, one of the best coppersmiths of the 19th century. See this maker's mark? He showed the magnifying glass to Camilla, and she saw faint letters on the bottom. He mostly worked on commission for wealthy merchants and nobles. His works are very rarely found in private collections, most are in museums. Camilla listened, holding her breath. The words were rare and sounded encouraging, but she was afraid to ask about the price directly. But that's not all, Leon continued, his voice tinged with excitement. When I cleaned the bottom, I noticed something strange. The bottom seemed too thick for such a piece, so I decided to check. He took the kettle and carefully turned it upside down. Camilla saw that in the center of the bottom there was a barely noticeable round line, as if something was inserted there. It turns out the bottom is double. Look. The dealer took a thin tool and carefully pressed on a certain spot. There was a soft click, and the round plate in the center of the bottom slightly lifted. A secret compartment, whispered Camilla. Those were made to store the most valuable things, and your neighbor clearly knew about it. Leon carefully removed the round plate. Underneath, they found a small hollow containing a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. The fabric was old, yellowed, but well preserved. Shall we open it? The dealer asked. Camilla nodded, unable to utter a word. Her hands trembled so much she clenched them into fists. Leon unfolded the cloth, and golden coins glimmered on the table, 5 round coins bearing portraits of emperors and double-headed eagles, each about the size of a large button. My God! Camilla breathed out. This is real gold. The real thing. Royal Chervonets from old times. But beneath the coins was something else, a yellowed piece of paper folded several times. Leon carefully unfolded it, and Camilla saw lines written in old ink, faded but still legible letters. Whoever finds this treasure, know it is meant for good people in the black day of their lives. I, a second guild merchant, leave this wealth not to my heirs, who are already well provided for, but to those who prove worthy of help in their hour of need. May the Lord bless whoever uses this gift with a pure heart. Read it, said the antiques expert. Camilla sat stunned. Abrams, Leslie's last name. So it was her ancestor who hid the treasure in the teapot more than 150 years ago. And the neighbor knew about it. How much? How much could it be worth? She finally dared to ask. Leon took one of the coins, carefully examined it under a magnifying glass, tested it with a magnet. A precise appraisal is needed, but roughly, coins in this condition are worth from 200,000 to 400,000 each. There are 5 coins here, plus the teapot itself as an antique. Camilla felt dizzy. She tried to quickly do the math in her head. If it's about 50,000 per coin on average, then 5 coins equal 250,000. Plus the teapot, about 300,000 total. I don't understand, she muttered. That's more than enough to pay off our debt. Much more. Do you have documents proving the teapot rightfully belongs to you? The neighbor gave it to us as a wedding gift. There were witnesses, but no written deed. I see. Then it would be best to get a written confirmation of the gift from her so there won't be any questions when you sell it later. Camilla took her phone with trembling hands and dialed John's number. John, are you sitting? She said, barely holding back her excitement. We need to go to Leslie's urgently. And you can take tomorrow off. We'll have to go to the notary and the bank. What happened? You sound strange. The teapot. Remember the old lady's teapot? It's... John, we're saved. I'll explain at home. An hour later, they stood at Leslie's apartment door. Camilla held the clean teapot with the secret compartment, and John was still trying to believe what he'd heard from his wife. The door opened to reveal a familiar gray-haired woman, even more fragile after all these years. Seeing the young neighbors, she smiled. Camilla, John, what a surprise. Come in, come in. In a small room with faded wallpaper and old furniture, they sat at a table covered with a crocheted tablecloth. Leslie set down small plates with jam and started brewing tea. Leslie, Camilla began, placing the teapot on the table. We wanted to return your gift. The old lady looked at the teapot and shook her head. Why return it? I gave it from the heart. We found a treasure inside, gold coins and a note from your great-grandfather. Leslie looked long at the young couple, then sighed softly. So the time has come. I thought so. You knew? John was amazed. Of course I knew. Great-grandfather told me before he died that he had gold in the teapot for those who would need help. He told me, give it to people with good hearts when you see they're going through hard times. But why us? We were young and happy then. I've been watching you all these years, the old woman smiled. I saw how you help neighbors, how you treat children, how you love each other. Camilla stood, approached the old woman, and hugged her tightly. Thank you. You saved our family. Don't thank me, thank your great-grandfather. He was wise, foresaw that the gold would one day help someone. Just be sure to use it wisely. That same evening, they notarized a document confirming that the teapot and everything inside it was a gift from Leslie to Camilla and John's family. The next day, they took the coins for appraisal at an auction house. Experts confirmed the authenticity of the coins and valued them altogether at $300,000. The teapot added another $50,000 as a work by a famous craftsman with a unique history. $350,000, the appraiser said. Very good condition, rare specimens. We are ready to buy everything immediately. John and Camilla exchanged glances. The amount was more than they could have dreamed of, even in their wildest fantasies. That same evening, holding a check, Camilla and John climbed the stairs to Leslie's apartment with a bouquet of white roses and a box of expensive chocolates. They had so many questions that had been on their minds since the treasure was found. Come in, the old lady invited, opening the door. The tea is just ready. They sat at the same small table as yesterday, but now the atmosphere was completely different. Camilla felt immense gratitude and at the same time a kind of sacred reverence toward this fragile woman who had turned out to be the keeper of such an incredible family secret. Leslie, John began, placing his hands on the table, please tell us the whole story. How did your great-grandfather become a merchant? Why did he decide to hide the gold in that way? The old woman slowly stirred her tea with a spoon, as if gathering her thoughts, then looked up. Alfred Abrams, my great-grandfather, was a man of an amazing fate. He was born into a serf family, but even as a child showed extraordinary talent for trade. The landlord noticed his cleverness and sent him to the city to learn a craft. Great-grandfather first became a clerk, then opened his own shop, and by the age of 40 he already owned several stores in the capital. Did he have a big family? Camilla asked. 3 sons, but the eldest died in the Crimean War, the middle one fell into alcoholism, and the youngest. The youngest turned out to be greedy and cruel. When great-grandfather grew old, the youngest son began demanding a division of the inheritance, threatening to sue. Alfred Abrams was very worried. He saw that the son would waste the money and cheat people. Leslie stood up, went to an old dresser, and took out a worn photo in an oval frame. Here he is, my great-grandfather. Taken shortly before his death. The photo showed a man about 60 years old with wise eyes and a full beard, dressed in a merchant's frock coat. He was a handsome man, Camilla smiled. And kind eyes, kind, yes, wise. He came up with that trick with the teapot. He told my great-grandmother, my son will not get my gold. Let it help someone who deserves it. And my great-grandmother was a simple, God-fearing woman. She understood her husband and swore to keep the secret. How did the teapot get to you? John asked. From great-grandmother to grandmother, from grandmother to mother, from mother to me. Every generation knew about the treasure, but there was no worthy person nearby. Mother used to say, wait, Tanya, people will come who need it more. The old woman sat back down at the table and looked at the young couple warmly. Then you moved into our apartment across the hall. I immediately noticed, young, polite, loving each other. I remember, John, how you fixed my lock when it got stuck. Not for money, not even for thanks. You just saw it was hard for an old woman and helped. That's just basic, John blushed. Anyone would help. Oh no, dear. I have seen many people in my life. Most just walk by, pretending not to notice others' troubles. But you helped me carry my bag. And when I was sick, Camilla brought me medicine from the pharmacy. Camilla remembered that time. It was about 3 years ago when Leslie was bedridden with a cold and couldn't get to the pharmacy herself. But we were still living well then, she said. Why give the teapot as a wedding gift? Life is complicated, things happen. I knew sooner or later you'd go through a hard time. Everyone does. It was important to wait for the moment when you really needed help. And you didn't tell us about the treasure on purpose. Why? Great-grandfathers will. Let them find it themselves when the time comes. He believed good people would always find a way if given a little help. That's why you found it and guessed to take the teapot to an antiques expert. John shook his head. Incredible story. So your great-grandfather more than 100 years ago foresaw that his gold would help strangers. He was a wise and far-sighted man. He always said, money should work for good, not lie dead weight. And you know what's interesting? A sly gleam appeared in the old woman's eyes. Great-grandfather wrote "for good people" in the note. And what's your last name? You are good, Camilla replied. See? Even your last name fits perfectly. Fate or coincidence, I don't know, but it turned out beautifully. They sat for a long time, drinking tea with jam, and Leslie told about her family, how her parents hid the teapot during the war, how they guarded it in the difficult post-war years. Have you ever been tempted to use that money yourself? Camilla asked cautiously. After all, you didn't always live easily. That happened, the old woman nodded. Especially hard after the war. My husband died near Stalingrad. I was left alone with a little daughter. Sometimes we had nothing to eat, but my mother strictly warned, that gold isn't yours, Tanya. You are just a keeper. The time will come, and you'll understand whom to give it to. And you waited your whole life for that moment. All my life. And I waited. Now my soul is at peace. I've fulfilled great-grandfather's will. As they were about to leave, Camilla hugged Leslie and quietly said, Thank you for being who you are, for preserving not only the gold but also faith in people. We will never forget what you have done for us. I haven't done anything special, the old woman waved her hand dismissively. I just lived and watched. Now you live happily and remember, money isn't the most important thing in life. The main thing is love, kindness, and willingness to help others. We will remember, promised John, and we will definitely teach our children that. Descending the stairs, Camilla and John were silent, digesting what they had heard. The story was even more amazing than they had imagined. It turned out they had become part of a chain of kindness stretching back a century and a half. You know, John said when they entered their apartment, now I understand why she was so insistent that we take care of the teapot. She knew sooner or later we would understand its true value. A wise woman, Camilla agreed. And what willpower it must have taken to keep someone else's secret all her life without giving in to temptation. The children were already asleep, and the couple sat in the kitchen to consider their plans for the future. They would pay off the bank debt tomorrow. That was decided. But what to do with the remaining money? This was a chance to start a new life, and they could not miss it. The next morning, John and Camilla went to the bank first thing. John carried a folder with documents and the bank card where the proceeds from the antique sale had been deposited. His heart was pounding, although the worst was behind them. "Welcome," greeted them the manager handling problem debts, the very Charlotte Morris who had called to remind them of the overdue payments. "I understand you want to pay off the debt?" "In full?" she asked firmly. "Principal, interest, fines, every cent," John replied. Charlotte Morris checked the computer. $27,521. "Are you sure you want to close the loan early?" "Absolutely sure." The procedure took about an hour, signing documents, transferring money, receiving a certificate of full repayment. When the manager handed them the certificate stamped by the bank, Camilla felt as if a heavy weight had lifted from her shoulders. "Congratulations," smiled Charlotte Morris. "The apartment is fully yours again. You can get the ownership documents in a few days." Exiting the bank, they hugged right there on the street. Passers-by glanced at the happy couple who rejoiced like children. "Free," whispered John. "Finally free from this nightmare." "And we still have almost $200,000 left," added Camilla. "What shall we do?" They went home in high spirits, making plans for the future. John could now calmly look for a job he loved, no longer grabbing at any offer out of desperation. "Maybe we should think about our own business," he suggested. "You know," Camilla said while they sat in their kitchen with cups of coffee, "I've always dreamed of a small cafe, a cozy place where people could not only eat but relax their souls. With good coffee, homemade pastries, and fresh flowers." "Interesting idea," John said thoughtfully. "I have some ideas too. Maybe we combine them? A cafe with a computer corner where people could work on laptops and use the internet. I could handle support, and you could run the kitchen side." "Where would we open it?" "Rent in the city center is expensive. Remember that space on the first floor of our building? It used to be a grocery store and is empty now. Neighbors complained there's nowhere decent to eat nearby." The idea seemed so good that they immediately went to check out the space. The management company confirmed the area was available, the rent quite reasonable, all utilities were in working order. The next 2 months flew by in pleasant busywork. They registered their own company, got all the necessary permits, and renovated the space. Camilla studied cooking courses and recipes, bought kitchen equipment. John took care of the technical side, installed internet, set up computers, created an ordering system. They named the cafe simply Home. The interior really felt homey: wooden tables, soft sofas, potted live plants, bookshelves. Local artists' paintings hung on the walls, and a brightly colored fish aquarium stood in the corner. The opening was scheduled for Saturday. Camilla spent the whole previous day preparing, baking pies, making soup. John was setting up equipment and checking all systems one last time. "Are you nervous?" Camilla asked, seeing her husband wipe the already clean tables for the 10th time. "Very. What if no one comes? Or they come but don't like it?" "They will come and they will like it," Camilla said confidently. The first visitor on the opening day was their neighbor, Uncle Gregory from the 3rd floor. He ordered coffee with a pastry and praised for a long time how delicious it was. "I've long dreamed that something decent would open here," he said, finishing his coffee. "Before, I had to go downtown if I wanted a proper meal." By lunchtime, mothers with children from nearby playgrounds had gathered. The kids were delighted to look at the aquarium, and the mothers praised the homemade pastries and cozy atmosphere. In the evening, when the rush of visitors had subsided, Leslie came into the cafe. She slowly walked around the hall, examining the interior, then sat down at a table by the window. "How beautifully you've arranged everything," she said approvingly. "You can feel it was made with soul," Camilla said, approaching Leslie. "What would you like?" "I'd like some tea," the old lady replied, smiling. Leslie took a sip and closed her eyes in pleasure. Delicious. And you know what? My great-grandfather would be pleased. He always said, true wealth is when your money brings joy to people. And here you are, you opened a cozy place where neighbors can relax and chat. We try, Camilla smiled. We want people to feel at home here. You're succeeding, the old lady agreed. And how are your children? They're glad their parents don't worry anymore, John laughed, sitting down at the table. Oliver even wrote a school essay about how the teapot saved our family. The teacher didn't believe him at first, thought he made it up. Outside the window, an autumn evening was beginning. Soft light glowed in the cafe, quiet music played, and the smell of fresh pastries and coffee filled the air. Local residents sat at nearby tables, a young couple with a child, an elderly man with a book, students with laptops. You know, Leslie, Camilla said while pouring the old lady some more tea, we decided to start a tradition. Every month, we'll choose one family from the neighbors who got into a difficult situation and help them however we can, with food, money, or just support. A wise decision, the old lady approved. Goodness should come back into the world. And we've told the children the whole story about the teapot and your family. We want them to understand, the most valuable gifts aren't the expensive ones, but those made from the heart. Leslie finished her tea and stood up, getting ready to leave. Thank you for everything, she said, kissing Camilla and John on the cheeks. For honoring my great-grandfather's trust, for understanding the main thing, happiness isn't in money, but in the ability to make the world around you better. When the old lady left, Camilla took the copper teapot in her hands and looked at it thoughtfully. It's amazing how one small thing can change a whole life, she said. It's not the thing that changed it, but the people, John corrected her. The merchant who cared for future generations. Leslie, who kept the secret her whole life. You and I, who didn't give up in difficult times, and our children, who now know what true values are. Street lamps lit up outside the window. The working day at the cafe was coming to an end, but they weren't in a hurry to close. This was their place, their new life, their happiness, gained not only from the gold in the old teapot but also from faith in the good, love for each other, and the readiness to move forward no matter what.